I'm Lau Miguez, and this is SEO in 2025.
Now, what's your number one SEO tip for 2025?
I recommend to maximize your global reach by treating each international market as unique and creating tailored strategies that resonate with local audiences.
Superb. Okay, so what do you mean by treating each international market uniquely?
I just see, and obviously I happen to see a lot of this because I work with a lot of clients that work with international markets, but I happen to see that, for example, LATAM is a thing, right? So when we are talking about doing UK, doing Spain, digital PR in Spain, digital PR in UK, but then we say digital PR in LATAM. But obviously when people ask me, do you do LATAM, do you do digital PR for LATAM, I always get quite surprised because we are talking about 33 countries, right? We are not talking about just one. I still think that each country is a collection of cultures and a collection of like a lot of different subtleties that we need to consider. When we are talking like about such a chunk of like, part of the world, it's really important that we are treating each country with the respect and the time it deserves. And the potential is huge.
Yeah, it's probably just ignorance. It's like saying, do you do digital PR for English-speaking countries?
Exactly, yeah. It is very different, isn't it? If we look at the US and even saying that you do digital PR for the US, obviously I'm assuming, I don't do digital PR for the US personally, but I'm assuming it's very different. The cultural differences, the media landscape, the audience, the topics that are relevant, and also what's going on in the press. In one part of the US, there might be something going on that obviously it's going to jeopardize or help your campaign. Whereas in other part, the news might be more stable. So I think it's just very important to actually treat each individual, especially if we are already making the effort of distributing campaigns and, actually targeting those markets, then let's do it correctly.
Absolutely. I mean, you got so many niche areas, even within countries as well. We happen to be based in the UK at the moment. You've got stories that wouldn't necessarily resonate with the north of England that would resonate with London, and vice versa. And then you've got sub niches within there as well. So I guess you can get hyper local with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as well, when you start working in international markets, especially obviously personally in Spanish speaking markets, you realize the niches are not as much. There's not as many niches as there could be in the UK, for example. So you won't find a lot of business publications. Or I remember the first time someone told me, like, we have a media list for hiking publications in the UK, which is like, you never find that in Spain or, in certain parts of Latin America. The niches are more the journalists that you will find in a national newspaper or in a regional newspaper. So knowing all those things is key because you might have a campaign that is very specific in terms of like the angles that you have and the niches that you have. And then when you actually go into distribute it, you realize, well, there's not really that particular kind of like niche in this country. As I said, if you go for, I don't know, hiking publications in Spain, there might be one, and I'm really sorry if they are listening to this, but I really don't think you'll find a lot.
But there might be multiple tapas publications in Spain and probably not in the UK.
Probably, yeah.
One thing that you say is transcreate, don't translate. What does that mean?
I just think that, yeah, you can, I personally can see a campaign when it's been just translated. So when you put it through DeepL or when you use ChatGPT, and I've seen them so many times being published. And, I'm not going to lie, they do get links sometimes. They can work, they can get some coverage. But I feel, again, we are making the effort of going to another country. Let's try to resonate with the audience a little bit. So obviously, let's try to add some cultural, social context to the content that we are creating that will allow us to not only make ourselves understood, but also resonate with the message that we are trying to get across. So for example, if we are talking about the job market and we know that in Mexico, they are struggling a lot with the job market at the minute, let's try to, or for example, they just which happened in a recent campaign, they just included a law in, I believe it's Chile, to reduce the weekly working hours because they were quite high in terms of like other countries in the OECD. If you know that, include it in the content because it's going to make people resonate with it. Whereas if you just get, working hours per country and you translate it to different countries, you don't include absolutely anything that could make people resonate. You just, translate it. So there might be a reference there in that content that actually it has nothing to do with the audience in Mexico or in Chile, but it has something to do with people in Spain. So I believe that just taking your content and just simply translate it to another. It's just, yeah, you're missing out on an opportunity to really include something that will make people resonate.
Yeah, the first Google result about transcreation is saying that it's the process of adapting content from one language to another while maintaining the existing tone, intent, and style. So adapting is the key element. Which parts of the piece of content should you adapt? I mean, how much do you need to change it for it to be perceived as being hyper relevant and local to an audience?
I just think, as I said, if you, for example, know that, there's a certain law, like everyone in Chile is talking about this law that is going to allow them to work less hours a week. And you're writing a piece of content about working hours, but you don't include that at all. Obviously, there's going to be something missing. Everyone is talking about it, but you're not actually addressing it in this piece of content that is, very relevant to that. Obviously, there's certain data that you can still use. Imagine that you're doing a massive data campaign that works globally for or even for LATAM. So you've got Mexico, Colombia, Cuba, Chile, and you've got a lot of data. If, just try to every time that you're transcreating or translating the content, try to have a look a little bit like what's going on within that topic in the country. So you can include some references that can make that content more relevant for the given country. But also, if you're making a joke, if you're making a pun, if you're using certain words, are those words you used in the country that you are outreaching to? Are you making sure that you're not offending anyone? It might be the case that the other day I was distributing a campaign that was a side hustle in Chile, but I was aware that precisely the working hours in Chile were quite high and they were trying to reduce them. So I was like, maybe side hustles is not the best topic to talk about. So things like that. I think everything is related. But when I talk about transcreation, is obviously read the news, just read what's going on, just make sure that you're understanding their culture. Because otherwise, not only your content might not resonate, but you might make a mistake. You might say something that is a bit offensive. You might say something that is just not timely for what's going on in the news. So I think it's very important. I've seen a lot of campaigns being distributed by people or agencies or whatever that I know for a fact they haven't even checked the news in the country. And I always put this example that is like walking into a room when people is having a conversation and without even listening to what they are talking about, just say what you have to say. It might be very inappropriate. So yeah, I think everything is related.
Yeah, so you say checking the news that's going on in the country, because you also talk about understanding the local media landscape. Is that what you mean? You basically need to know the stories that are going on at the moment in that particular environment before you add your story. Otherwise, you might actually come across as offensive or irrelevant in relation to what's going on.
I think it helps everything, because if you genuinely, before even you start ideation, if you just have a look a little bit of what is the context, what is the, media landscape looks like, you are going to know what kind of campaigns are going to work. Because, for example, if there's not a lot of regionals, or if regionals have very low DR, you might not want to target them anyway. So you might think, okay, well, maybe a regional campaign is not my go-to. Maybe I'm going to do more of a national campaign that has more of a sports niche, because I know that there's a lot of sports publications. So, you understand the media landscape. Then understanding the media landscape as well is understanding not every country is like the UK, right? So if you go to Spain, there's the handicap that there's not as many digital publications, but there's also the opportunity that you might land on TV, on radio. So if you know that, there's an opportunity there, which is great. And then also understanding what's going on is going to allow you knowing how to target journalists. Is there something relevant that you can tie to your campaign? Again, as I said, has a law just been announced that might be really relevant to your campaign? So therefore you can tie it in and you can make a relation to it. It's just, reading the news in the country and just knowing a little bit of what's going on in that particular niche, at least. I'm not saying you have to read every single newspaper, but just have a look at the niche. But as I said, but let's go back to the working example, the working hours. If you know that, just look at careers or people that talks about job or things like that. And I think it helps in every step of the process, from ideation to content creation to distribution, everything.
And if you're making a move into a new market, maybe Chile, for example, or just whatever country really, and you're not really sure of how much content you're going to publish there, is it still worthwhile trying to actually make relationships with the local media and get them to assist you with the distribution of your content?
100%. I feel like sometimes we forget that we are not only just sending press releases, like there's people on the other side that might remember you. And that's, I think, that's a success in a way. When you're like distributing campaigns to a country and then the journalists kind of like reply to you and they act as if they know you, you know that in a way you've won because they receive a lot of press releases, right? And making relationship with those journalists will not only allow you to just, know if there's not a possibility there, but I feel like it will also help you in terms of like writing the content. So for example, if you've got a relationship with a journalist, you'll be like, what kind of content do you think would be relevant in this case scenario? Because sometimes they might even help you and say, these are the kind of content that we publish, these are the kind of things that we're interested in. But I feel like for me personally, I don't think you can succeed in a country without trial and error. That's what I've done every single time I've started fresh in a new country. When I started even with Spain, when I started Mexico, with Chile, it was a lot of navigating things, switching things. And I feel like that's just like in everywhere. The UK digital PR landscape changed a lot from when I started in digital PR to now. So I feel like it's just a learning curve all the time. But I'd encourage anyone that is thinking about doing something for another market, maybe don't do a campaign that is going to cost you thousands, or, it's going to be just do a data campaign with like accessible data, good piece of content that you can easily outreach with like, plain graphics or whatever. Give it a try, see how it works, just practice it a little bit, get some relationships going, get a media list going. As I said, it's just not, I don't think there's like an exact science, but trial and error is the best way to go.
Okay, so it's important to understand the local media landscape. What about the local audience? How do you do a better job of understanding who the ultimate reader of the piece is going to be?
I think the journalists are, as I said, I think it comes ultimately to like reading what, like the news, for example, right? Because journalists are, at the end of the day, they are not writing for us, they are writing for an audience. So whatever they are writing about, they know that people cares about these. But another really, really good thing that I do, so for example, I don't normally do it in international markets. I remember one day I had to really quickly turn around the pitch for like a Star Wars related campaign. So I had to come up with like 3 ideas, and I've not watched Star Wars. I had one day to do it. I didn't have time to watch it.
You asked ChatGPT, summarize Star Wars for me.
Yeah, I know. And I did try that, but it was actually, I was not getting, what is people, because obviously ChatGPT is going to summarize Star Wars, but I can't actually know what is people interested in. What are the popular, do you know what I mean? Like when you are in that community, use Reddit, use Quora, like use all these community-based websites that you can just go search for a topic. So for example, imagine that again, sorry for the same example, it works really well. Job market in Mexico and Chile. Just go to Chile subreddit and try to find that certain topic and see what people is talking about. If you've seen an article around the job market, try to find it on Facebook. Try to see what the comments are like. That is the best way of knowing what people cares about. It's literally the best. Like social media is giving you all the answers about. So if there's an article about the job market and people's like, yeah, but they are not including this, this, and this, that's giving you a hint of what is people interested in. Oh, yeah, but they, for example, they are not including times of like transport, like commute in this, in this study. I spend 2 hours every day in my commute. So that people is worried about they are working a lot of hours, but actually nobody's talking about the hours of commute that is also really high in countries like Mexico or Chile. So that if people is talking about this in the comments, you can include it in your campaign. And I think, again, this is not just for international markets. I think these are great practice especially if you're not familiar with the topic. Star Wars, I got into the honestly, within an hour, I was an expert. I knew what everyone what was the character that everyone loved, what was the character that everyone hated. It was great. So yeah, use Reddit is absolutely amazing.
If an SEO is struggling for time, what should they stop doing right now so they can spend more time focusing on localizing your global PR campaigns in 2025?
I think I've seen it so much, especially lately. We are just so focused on just launching campaign after campaign and creating new content, fresh content constantly. I am a really good friend of like looking at the content I've done, repackage it, update it, and launch it again. So it's best if you have 2 less campaigns in a year or 3 less. Like you don't have to have a campaign every month. Stop, breathe, have a really good strategy, do some research. That research is going to do much more for you and your campaigns and your SEO than, just doing a lot of campaigns blindly, not knowing where you're going to get to. And also it's going to help you manage expectations a bit more as well in different countries. So I feel like definitely the number of campaigns doesn't matter. I've got campaigns that I did 3 years ago that are still getting links and coverage today. So if you do a good campaign, you'll still see the rewards. Like you don't have to do a campaign every month. So I feel like that's something that we need to stop doing. Like so many campaigns. Look at the content you already have. I'm sure you'll have some data that you can use again. You don't need to do a brand new shiny campaign every month. It's genuinely not needed.
Lau Miguez is a freelance international digital PR specialist, and you can find her over at laumiguez.com. Lau, thanks so much for being part of SEO in 2025.
Thank you.
I've been your host, David Bain. Get your copy of SEO in 2025, the book, over at SEOin2025.com.